Jason, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Mark.
It is an honor to have you on. So before we dive in, this is a show for dads by dads. Give us your brief dad 411 bio.
So I have 3 kids, and I have a son that's 24. He's almost 25. I'd be 25 now. Shoot, I should know that. From a previous marriage. And then I have a 9-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son from my current wife. We've been together almost 15 years now. I did a 30-year career in the SEAL teams. Served at every level of enlisted tactical leadership in that time and several levels of executive leadership. The apex of my career was being the command master chief of SEAL Team 5 and the command master chief of our training detachment on the West Coast. I retired 2 years ago, and I've been working with Echelon Front, which is a leadership consulting firm, and we help businesses and organizations solve problems through leadership. And since parenting is leadership,
it is
something that I've been thinking hard about the last 5 years as I try and improve as a leader, and every way that I try to improve as a leader translates directly across to improving as a dad and a
100%,
husband.
100%. And that's why I have so many military guys on this show, is because so much of what you practice and preach in the military as it pertains to leadership directly correlates to your role at home as a father. I 100% agree.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of guys don't get that, but a lot of guys do. And I just, I had the pleasure to work with a bunch of individuals that were just great fathers. And oftentimes when we were sitting around, just talking, it would be talking about our kids and our parenting styles and how we could do it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like anything. You got to just continually work on sharpening that axe, right? It takes effort, intentional effort to be a good dad. That's why we're here.
Yep.
Well, I'm sure like many of the guys listening out there, I initially heard of you through Jocko. I think everybody listening knows who Jocko is. I've since followed you for quite a while on Instagram. And I saw a post that you made sometime late last year about mental toughness. And it really resonated with me. And like we've kind of been dancing around this already, mental toughness applies so much to, in addition to leadership, mental toughness applies to fatherhood, right? And like so many guys have seen in 2020, it required a certain amount of mental toughness to get through 2020, to lead our families well through that with all the economic ups and downs, jobs being lost, jobs in jeopardy, having to provide and protect our families through all of the unknowns. That requires a certain degree of mental toughness. We're not out there kicking ass on the battlefield necessarily, but we're leading our families well through tough times. And I thought, what better opportunity to bring somebody on who's qualified to talk about mental toughness. So thank you for your time. And before I forget, thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Yeah, I know you had it, like you touched on, you had an illustrious military career, which I would love to dive into just a little bit more before we get too far.
Sure.
30 years in the SEALs.
Mm-hmm.
So did you go right into the SEALs, like right when you entered the military?
Yeah. Okay. So here's how that worked out, Mark. And first of all, I appreciate thanks for my service. It was a privilege to serve. And I was 7 when I made the decision that I was going to go in the military. My father was a Marine. And so for a long time, the trajectory I was on, I was going to be a Marine. And then, when I started to really dial into this in high school, I was taking a martial art called Kaji Kempo, and one of my instructors happened to be a SEAL in Vietnam. And my parents were both really impressed by the fact that this instructor was a SEAL. And I was like, I'd never heard of the SEALs. I'm like, I felt like, what's that, the Navy's mammal program or something? And then my dad explained to me, this is the Navy Special Operations Forces, that stands for Sea, Air, and Land. They are really, really, really good. And so as I started to learn more about what SEALs are, and that they're the maritime special operations force, and I swam, played water polo, was a lifeguard, and grew up on the beach, I'm like, oh, this is a perfect fit for me.
Yeah.
So I enlisted in the Navy straight out of high school. They had a dive fair program at that time where you could enlist with a contract to get into the, you would be guaranteed the opportunity to go to the selection course, right? As long as you did the stuff. That was full when I enlisted. They're like, yeah, sorry, we don't have that anymore. So I took a chance and I chose one of the source ratings for SEALs. Now the SEALs have their own rating, and this is, if you don't understand all this, I'm sorry. It just takes too much time to explain what a rating
It's all
is.
good.
Basically, your job in the Navy. So I took the source rating of gunner's mate, and my dad was still active duty in the Marine Corps. So prior to me enlisting, I got a physical to ensure that I would be physically capable of going in the teams, meaning that my hearing was good enough. I had color vision, and there wasn't something that was going to disqualify me that I couldn't help. That was good to go. So when I was in boot camp, I took the test for the SEAL teams, passed it, and then after my A school, which was training me for what my job would be had I gone into the regular Navy, I got orders. I completed my A school, and then I went straight from my A school, which was gunner's mate, straight to basic underwater demolition training. So I enlisted in 87, and I graduated from basic underwater demolition SEAL training in December of 88, checked into SEAL Team 5 in 89.
Nice.
And so I did 12 years. Then my first wife was frustrated with the amount of time I was gone, and she wanted me to get out. So I separated from the military, and then me being around all the time didn't fix our problems. Me being around all the time just kind of magnified them. We wound up separating and getting a divorce. And as soon as that was finalized, I went back on active duty. I was back on active duty 1 month before 9/11.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then, yeah, my timing from that aspect was perfect because I was able to hit the ground running with the rest of the community. And then it's been a meat grinder since 9/11. I mean, it's 20 years at war, in some cases 2 wars. Our country's never been at war that long. Our special operations forces have been burning their candles at both ends for a while. And it's been rough. And there you have it.
Yeah, there's a lot. You touched on a lot there. So were you in the active duty SEALs for the first Gulf War?
Yeah, I was. In fact, first Gulf War, I was already on deployment when it happened. So I was on, that was my very first deployment. And I was on the Amphibious Readiness Group on the USS Ogden, LPD 5. And we were 2 or 3 months into our Westpac deployment when Saddam, and the Iraqis rolled into Kuwait. And so our deployment got extended to, we wound up doing 10 months. And we were involved in Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Well, I can imagine in 30 years of military life, you've seen it all.
A lot. Yeah, that's for sure.
So, and like we've touched on already, you've got to be tough to get through BUDS. You've got to be tough to stay in the SEALs and do that job that's required of you. So mental toughness is just part of who you are, but that means a lot, or different things to different guys. So give us your definition of mental toughness.
Mental toughness is the ability to withstand discomfort and to continue moving forward. And then I'm going to add this to it because that's the part that every SEAL they've got that dialed down. Mental toughness is also the ability to have control of your emotions and being able to detach from your emotions. And I'll tell you, the ability to detach from your emotions is orders of magnitude harder than to be able to detach from physical discomfort. It is. It's so much harder, and it requires true humility, because you have to admit to yourself, you know what, maybe I don't have the answers, and even though this is an opposing view, maybe there's some truth in it, and to be able to step back and look at everything from a true neutral position is hard. And I don't have it down. It's something I'm working towards, but it's difficult.
No, that's such a good point, because I would imagine in the military and in life too, it's like when you're going through physical discomfort, you can muscle your way through it because you know it's going to end, right? I can get through this and then things are going to get better. But with mental, with the emotional side of things, it's like that's ingrained in you and you can't escape that. It's like, how do you detach from that? That is I would think, a learned skill, is it not?
Yeah, I think it absolutely. It's something that's learned, and it's really not possible unless you're practicing some kind of mindfulness where you're just aware of your emotions. And physical discomfort too, you can tap into anger to power through it.
Sure.
You can tap into fear sometimes to power through it. So, you know, as we're talking about that, I think that's where that difference comes from, which is what makes it so harder to detach from the emotions, because you can actually use those emotions to power your way through physical discomfort.
So I would imagine those are some tactics that you tapped into along the way through the years. But when it comes to just mental toughness in general, how did you personally go about like developing and cultivating that?
It started with me listening to the Jocko podcast. So really, I started doing it like, I mean, I've practiced it before, but I have improved as a person exponentially, specifically, and I didn't understand podcasts prior to 2000, was it 15 or 16 Jocko podcast started? I feel like it might even been before that. But you know, I've known Jocko since 1993. We're good friends. My wife said, "Hey, did you know that Jocko has a podcast?" And he already had written Extreme Ownership, and I listened to that, and that was super helpful. But you know, you read a book, it kind of sinks in for 2 weeks, and then it pushes away. The podcasts are recurring. Yeah. And the overall message of most of those is a big perspective change. It's like, you know, you lose perspective because of how good we have it. And then it caused an opportunity for huge introspection on my own. I was started down this path prior to that though, but it was really in earnest in listening to the podcast. When I came back from my deployment to Afghanistan in 2009, I was really, really suffering from a real bad temper that, because it was a very, very intense and dynamic and violent deployment. And my Iris told me, she's like, "Hey, you are not the same person you were. You really are having difficulty with your temper. Do you guys have a psychologist or someone you can talk to?" And I started seeing a psychologist then, and it really, really helped me, because the psych I was seeing was good. Really, really helped me work through a lot of the issues and begin to be introspective and begin to look for improvement.
And there's nothing wrong with seeking some help to get through that either.
No. Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. You know, if your car's broken, you go see a mechanic. If you break your knee, you go see an orthopedic surgeon, right? And if your head's hurting, you go see a psychologist. And my psychologist, those sessions with him, they were not easy. And that's a good thing, you know? And so that was something throughout my career from 2010 to 2018. I was very open and honest with other people. And in a way, I was showing vulnerability by setting the example to show other guys that, like, yeah, I go, "Hey, I've got to go see the psych right now. And by my example, it helped a lot of other guys also go and sit down and talk to someone and work through their issues.
Oh, 100%. I think when guys hear people like yourself talk about the fact that you went and saw a psychologist and you had your own issues to work through, it just makes their issues, I don't know, it just a lot easier to deal with, I think. And
absolutely. And you know, and for some folks, it was the psychologist they saw, and other folks, it was the chaplain. And luckily, you know, we've got both the chaplains and the psychs available, and people can choose who they want to see. And both of them are trained for the most part. And one thing that really helps if you're holding a lot of like pain inside you or whatever the hurt is, talking about it is like getting that poison, purging yourself of that poison that's just making you sick.
This podcast is part of the Edify Podcast Network. Edify is a faith-inspiring app that brings together thousands of the best Christian podcasts in one place for your listening enjoyment. Cut through the noise and grow your faith by diving into the world's top Christian podcasts today. Download the Edify app for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by going to edify.app. That's edifi.app.
so if I'm hearing you right, you know, you made it through the majority of your military career by just being an inherently tough, gritty dude. But then when you, towards the end of your career and after you've been out, is when you've really gotten a little bit more intentional about realizing that this mental toughness is a thing, and then you can grow it and build it and sharpen it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like the first aspect of mental toughness, overcoming discomfort. That's always been there, but it's later on where I kind of just discovered and begin try to practice detachment from emotion and taking an honest look at everything.
Yeah, man. So if you go back, think back to through your career, and maybe even like, I'll split this question into kind of like two areas as it relates to mental toughness. Is there a story that you can think of where mental toughness saved your life or somebody else's? And then the flip side of that is, can you think of an example where mental toughness has benefited you as a husband and a father?
Oh, absolutely. So in September of 2009 in Afghanistan, we were on an operation, was the first con-op or operation we were doing on an overall operation called Operation Leviathan. And we were going after a improvised explosive device facilitator, guy that was, you know, bringing everything together, building them, and then pushing them down into Kandahar to be placed on roads and stuff like that. We came in the middle of the night, hit his compound, which was up in the mountains. And so we took his compound and another compound adjacent to it. There was a larger village there, and then held a piece of high ground right next to that compound. In the morning, and when we cleared the compounds in the middle of the night, we found a huge cache of weapons. We found satellite phones. We found multiple passports for the same. It was obvious that this was the right place. We got some bad people. Then they actually attacked us that night, which they don't normally do because we can see in the dark and they can't. This is a testament to how hardcore the Taliban were in this little area. So they attacked us that night. We got in a firefight that night. It took care of it. It's pretty straightforward because we can see in the dark and they can't. Next morning, they spent some time, and all the women and children leave the village. The Taliban spent some time figuring out what high ground we were on, what compounds we were on. Then instead of attacking us straight away, they pushed elements up to all the high ground pieces around our high ground, because in the mountains, you can't just own all the high ground.
Right.
And once they had us surrounding, they hit us with an overwhelming barrage of fire where all of us had our heads down. We couldn't, if I was laying flat on my belly, looking up at a rock wall for our fighting position we'd built on that high ground, and it's maybe like this high above my head, and I'm watching it literally erode under the bullets that are hitting it. And I'm like, okay, well, the way this is going, I'm going to get shot here pretty soon, and I'm probably going to die here, but I'm going to push that to the back of my head, and I'm going to do what I need to do. So In the compounds below us, guys had built fighting positions on the roof, which is what we normally do, but because they were taking fire from up above them and they didn't have, top cover, they were forced to abandon those positions. Now they can't see out except for the few windows in the compound, and the Taliban had gotten close enough to them using cover and concealment. They were tossing grenades over the walls in the compounds with them, so they had to blow holes in the compound walls so they could see out. This went this way for about 20 minutes, and it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that we were all going to die because the aircraft we had overhead was the Predator, which is an unmanned aircraft. It's flown by someone sitting in a trailer somewhere far away, and it's looking at the battlefield through a thermal image. Thermal imagers work great, except for when it's 100 degrees out.
Oh.
Because all the rocks and everything is the same temperature. It's really hard to pick out the bad guys. Plus the Taliban, somehow they know that we have thermal imagers, and there's all kinds of countermeasures they have to try and hide from our thermal imagers. It's not able to see any of these guys firing on us. We finally got a couple of fast mover French Mirages showed up on station like 30 minutes after the firefight started. And then what they did was the two jets flew extremely low. We call it a show of force over the two ridge lines that we were taking the most fire from. And these French pilots did a great job. I mean, they flew lower than you've seen aircraft fly in any air show. And because they're low, they're kicking these flares off to confuse any heat-seeking missiles the enemy might have. This forced the Taliban to get their heads down because they hate our aircraft, which allowed us, now I could put my head up and start looking through my rifle and laying down suppressive fire on these positions we're taking fire from. Now we can hold our own. And it doesn't look like we're just going to all die in the next 20 minutes. The guys below us, they got a mortar set up and they just start pumping mortar rounds out. But we're 40 kilometers from the nearest base. We have got a limited supply of ammo. So now it's like, okay, we got maybe an hour and a half left, but then we'll be out of ammo then. A B-1 bomber checked on station about 30 minutes later, and B-1 bombers have got bombs to waste. And it's like yesterday, I can remember that pilot because I had dual comms on, so I had two radios. I was listening to our inter-squad comms, and I was listening to our fires net, which is the communications that our Joint Tactical Air Controller is talking to that aircraft. And he gave the pilot a recommendation, or said, hey, I can't give you a 9-line of specific points to bomb because we're taking fire from both these ridge lines. And the pilot's like, she's like, yeah, I'm going to drop, what is it? 4,000 pounds of ordnance for you. I'm going to give you 8 500-pound bombs, 4 on each ridge line, bracketed 100 yards apart, airburst 50 meters off the deck. And the B-1 bomber can do all that at the same time. And wow. She said it as coolly, as calmly as if she was saying, hey, I'm going down to the coffee shop. You want that latte you always get? And so then, over the radio, I hear her voice, weapons release, impact in 30 seconds. Then over squad comms, our Joint Tactical Air Controller, who was right next to me, gave a 10-second countdown, and then boom, 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 boom. 8 bombs, 4 in each ridge line, all blow up at the same time. Everybody cheered. Except the Taliban. They didn't cheer because half of them were wounded or killed in that attack. But
heck, man, I feel like cheering right now. This is great. Yeah,
it was awesome. The intensity of the firefight died down, but it was still the rest of the day until dark. There were still bullets whizzing around. Sure. It got up to 112 degrees on that piece of high ground I was at. We had no shade. At 2 p.m, we ran out of water.
Oh man.
So that was some real physical discomfort until it got dark when we could get water. So we were initially planning, the plan was for us to extract, to leave that night And when it got dark and we called back to say, hey, we figured our extraction would be sometime around midnight, and we called in to find out where our extraction would be, they told us over the radio, we're extending you in the field for 24 hours.
Ooh.
And I was like, inside, it's like aliens, right? I'm saying to myself, maybe I'm not up on current events, but we just got our asses kicked here today, and I wanted out. And they're like, you're staying another 24 hours. We want you to reinforce your positions. We want you to push out and hit these other targets while you're there. And so I had to take a deep breath. And now I've got the 2 platoon chiefs in my task unit underneath me that I've got to pass this word to. And I didn't like it. I knew that if I delivered it to them in a way that showed any emotion at all, that I would poison their minds, and they wouldn't like it either. But the fact of the matter is we're not extracting. So I needed just to get a handle of everything and figure it out. So it took me like 15 minutes to compose myself. And then I went down. At this point, it's dark. I was able to move from my position down to where they are, on the radio. I told them, hey, I need you guys to come in and meet me. And what I did was I said, hey, we're staying here for another 24 hours. Here's what we can do to get after it. We're going to push out, and we had our battle map out, and I'm going to push out. And I told one chief, you guys are going to go and hit these 2 compounds and search them. And, it was like compound 54 and 37 or something like that. You're going to do that. The other chief, hey, we need to reinforce these positions. They're going to send us helicopters with everything we need to get it in tonight. So let me know what both of you need so I can support you in getting this done, because we're going to make it happen. And I gave them ownership, a little bit of ownership of their pieces, and we were able to radio back and say, hey, this is the ammo we need resupplied. This is the extra weapons that we want brought in. This is the bullets, the beans, the batteries, and the bandages that we're going to need to stay here. And pushed that back, got it done. The next day we got into another giant firefight again. But, had I gone down there and kicked the dirt and rolled my eyes,
right,
when I passed that negative attitude would have poisoned them.
Yeah. Set you guys up to fail for sure.
And, in my own mind, I knew that I had to get around that. So I think that definitely was an aspect where mental toughness, not feeling like the victim, and just leaning into it saved a life.
Dude, there's so much.
I forgot the second portion of that question, Mark. What was it?
So, well, the second portion was, can you think of a story of when mental toughness helped you be a better husband and father?
Oh,
we can come back to that later, because there's a lot of points from your story that I'd love to just go back to. So leadership, man. I mean, that is the ultimate example of leadership, right? Like you said, you could have gone down there and kicked the dirt and had a bad attitude and poisoned the rest of the crew. And then you guys wouldn't have had the mindset you needed to go into the next day or fulfill your mission. But yeah, a good leader, it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it too, right? Whether it's on the battlefield, whether it's on the battlefield or at home with your kids or your wife for that matter. Like how we say what we say is so important. So I think that's a valuable lesson from that story. And yeah, man, mental toughness. I mean, here you are, it's one thing to be hot and sweaty and want to go inside of the air conditioning and then find out that for whatever reason you have to stay out. But here you guys are, you're hot, you're out of water. Oh, and by the way, you're being shot at.
Yeah.
Find out you got to stay out in it. That's the ultimate example of having to dig deep and get tough.
Yeah, it literally, when they said you're staying another 24 hours, it felt like I got kicked in the gut.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm not changing it. So here's what I got to say to my subordinates, and here's the face that I have to put on because we're going to be here. And so the choice is yours. I can't control the situations that I'm put in, I can only control how I react to them.
Yep. 100%. So guys who are going through life, and maybe times are tight, bank accounts a little thin, and maybe you lose your job because of everything going on in the world. What do? Are you going to be a victim, or are you going to, pull your boots up and get after it and go do what you need to do?
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I learned from other SEAL leaders, good leaders that I wanted to mimic very early on in the SEAL team. So I can't take credit for putting that face on. It's just something that was passed on to me.
Well, I mean, that's the way the military is designed to work, right? You learn from the guys that are ahead of you and go before you. So the other side of that question is, are there any stories or examples of mental toughness helping you become a better father or husband?
Sure. So when I'm driving and my wife says to me, "Hey, you need to slow down," or is just railing off a constant critique of my driving skills, it's difficult not to take that personally. It is. But the fact of the matter is, she's trying to make me better and keep our family safe. So when she's like, "Hey, don't check your text messages when you're driving because you're carrying our kids in the back of the car." Now it's real easy to go, "Oh, good grief, woman, leave me alone." But that's not being mental tough. That's just losing control to your ego and your emotions.
Wow.
Oftentimes, my parenting style is consequences for bad behavior. And that's not always that's like, while it's the most direct, it's not the best thing. And it doesn't seem to work as well opposed to practices that my wife does, where she'll talk to the kids ahead of time. She won't lose her temper if they're running around the house, and just says, "Hey, you guys have got to stop running and yelling. What have you got going on?" My daughter will reach a point where all the yelling and the consequences aren't going to work for her, because she's kind of lost control of her emotions. And what works the best is just to sit down with her on the couch and give her a hug and distract her from whatever she's having a tantrum about, until as she matures, she's getting better at handling her emotions. But my default mode a lot of time is like, "Hey, do this, or I'm going to send you to your room." And I'm learning that while that has its place, boundaries have their place. Consistency is one piece of being a good parent. There's a lot of other pieces there too.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think you're too far off.
Working hard.
Consequences, I think consequences are good as long as they're natural consequences. You do something wrong, there should be an equal and opposite reaction to that makes sense in the circumstances. And I think it requires a certain degree of mental toughness to not just establish those boundaries and those parameters, but to maintain them and hold them when they're pushing up against them, right? Those guardrails, they're going to see how far they can push and get away with things. And it requires us to be tough to say, no, those rules are in place for a reason and they're not changing. Here's why, but they're not changing.
Yeah. Consistency is the key.
Yeah.
I think I'm doing a poor job of articulating what I'm trying to say. The consequences absolutely 100% need to be there. There is also a point, like sometime with she just gets in a state where consequences aren't helping. That might come later. And then it's more of, "Hey, what's going on here?" And backing up and looking at it from a different direction. Like if I exercise a little bit of effort in explaining the why to my children oftentimes, and that takes, just planning ahead. "Hey, we're going into a store. I'm not buying you anything in the store. We're short on time. We need to get in and out of there real quick. Here's what I need out of you. Are you guys good with that?" Typically, then they're real easy. in the store. It's when I'm in a rush and I'm not paying attention to them. I'm paying attention to my own things, and then they're just bored and along for the ride, and then I start barking at them. Anymore, like I do patrolling with them in stores now or in any crowd, and it's helpful, where I'll just look at them and I'll say, hey, we're going to go in a file formation. Storm, you're walking point, I'm rear security, and awesome. Storm, I want you to take us to the sporting goods section. And now I have them both engaged.
Yeah, they've got ownership
in the store. Yeah, boy, it dials them in because I've got them engaged and they're doing something. Their behavior is much better. And then the other aspect to that is, at some point COVID will end and we'll be going back to football games and big sporting events where it's a straight up matter of safety. And like I've been to some, college football games where it's scary crowds and you could lose your kid in a second. Yeah. And I'll just say, hey, we're going file formation on me. And they just tuck right in behind me and we move. And I know I've got them, except for every seventh step, I am doing good patrolling techniques and looking back.
Sure.
And then to keep it interesting, we bounce from a file formation to a dual, or there's only 3 of us, to an echelon and back, just to make it fun and keep them engaged. Another buddy of mine, another SEAL, that one way that he uses to engage his kids in stores is he's like, they place like spies, and he's like, okay, I want you to count all the people you see with sunglasses. And then that's how he engages them. And shoot, just engage your kids and they're a lot easier to handle. Any time that I really find that my kids are behaving poorly, it's because I've done something wrong as a parent. Okay, now I've got it articulated. When my kids have done something poorly, it's because I failed as a parent ahead of time and I want to respond with the consequence when I could have just spent a little bit more time on the front end engaging them. Yeah. And doing something like a patrol or talking to them or making it interesting for them. Then that's what I was trying to say. I finally got there. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, man. And that is a hard pill for us guys to swallow. When our kids are acting up, not doing what we want them to do, it's not their fault. We got to look in the mirror 100%. I love some of those tactics that you just outlined though. That would be a lot of fun, going to the store with my little guy and say, all right, bud, don't pay attention to all the distractions. Take us to the camo section because we got to gear up for the next hunting trip, and really get them involved.
It's great. So the other thing that we'll do is like, if we're traveling through an airport, it's like, okay, here's where we got to go. Get us there. And then you watch them, learn where the gates are, or same thing that we'll do in a hotel. Okay, our room's on the second floor, get us to the deal, all that stuff. And then all that stuff too, you're training them to be confident, competent adults.
Yeah, 100%.
In the process.
So in addition to training them to be competent, confident adults, what do you do at home to instill some of this mental toughness into them as well? Do you do it through chores? Do you just do it by example, or thoughts on that? Have you figured it out yet?
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we are outdoors a lot. So they're getting used to being uncomfortable. And then we also try to engage them in conversation a lot about things that are going on. I try to find out from my daughter, like, well, what do you think about this? So we can have those discussions. And then having the 2 of them constantly beating on each other and calling each other names. And so it's a constant lesson in like, hey, I don't want to catch you calling people names or doing that. And then the other thing is, those are just words. If you react to your sister calling you a loser, you're letting her win. And that's a great training tool too. I got a great little video snippet that Iris is going to put out a thing. We were ice fishing last week and my daughter's there just going, oh, I'm so cold. And that's good, but hey, toughen up, Buttercup. I'm not going to let you freeze to death, but this is the kind of thing that we're going to do. and allowing them the freedom to skin their knees and things like that, which is really, really difficult. Not to helicopter parent, because, I really want to make everything super safe for them. But if I don't let them overcome some obstacles on their own and fail on their own, I'm setting them up for failure in the real world, because the real world isn't going to care, and it's going to be far more ruthless than anything I allow them to be exposed to.
Yeah, 100%. There's nothing wrong with allowing them to experience some controlled failure. Yeah, because there's more lessons in failure than success oftentimes.
Absolutely. I mean, for most people, you learn more from your failures than you did from advice you got. If I'd followed all the advice that I'd gotten from everyone that gave me great advice, I would be fine.
Yeah.
I would be a lot better off than I am today, but that's just how it is. I certainly wouldn't watch my kid not look both ways before crossing the street, get hit by a car, and say, well, what did you learn from that? But I will watch my daughter climb up a tree, and then when she screams that she's stuck and can't get down, not just rescue her,
right,
but rather come over and coach her down. Yeah.
100%, man. And like I mentioned earlier, I follow you on Instagram, and I love the pictures that you post. You guys are always outdoors, like you said. The things that you have your kids doing is great. Like, I think they were skinning a deer one time.
Yeah, well, that's the having like a homesteading type lifestyle, and it's really important to us that our kids understand where our food comes from. Yeah. And we have an amazing opportunity. It's really a privilege to live where we do, where we have the opportunity to just go out. We can see deer all the time. We can see turkeys, and we can hunt them. And then, and then we involve them in the process, and they're very excited about that. And I think it's a good thing, though. They understand where their food comes from. They help butcher the deer. They'll help skin it and gut it and talk them through all that. Again, it's a privilege, but we made a lot of sacrifices to live where we live. We live in a real small cabin. We only have one bathroom. And it's about 1,200 square feet of living space, but that's the choice that we made to live where we live. So it's a good exposure for them. I'm glad they got it.
Dude, I'm actually really envious of the scenario you just described. I think that would be amazing. My wife and I have talked about, when our kids are out of the house, we're just going to maybe buy an RV, and just live real simple, tour the country. So I think a cabin in the woods would be outstanding.
I mean, that looks like the ideal situation. And I know a lot of people that do that. I have a friend that was in the Navy that when he retired, he was financially set up enough where he really didn't have to work, because he's just a bachelor, and he tools around the country in his RV and just visits all the national parks and has a great time, and seems like a great experience. 100%.
Well, man, we've touched on a ton. I could talk to you for hours. I know you got to run, but I think through the lessons that you've learned and are passing on to your kids, and in how you guys live your lifestyle, you're teaching mental toughness in multiple forms and fashion. And that's going to be part of your legacy. So when you think of leaving a legacy, a lot of people think of things when they hear the word legacy, but if Jason Gardner were going to leave an inspired legacy, what does that phrase mean to you?
I want to leave a legacy of kindness. I want to leave a legacy of where my instinctive nature is, how can I be kind and empathetic with my fellow man, and women, and how I can be kind with myself. So when I look in the mirror and I look at all the things that I'm doing that I really shouldn't be doing, how that I'm not holding that against myself, but I'm holding that against those actions and looking at how I can do better. So I think, especially with what we've got going on right now in the world with COVID and all the political strife that's going on, I see both sides really playing this victim card, and it's unfortunate. And it's like, don't be a victim. You have the ultimate freedom, and that's the freedom of how you react to any given situation. And it takes you to realize when things are out of your control and what's inside your control. But I'll circle that all the way back to kindness.
Yeah, man, that's really good. We need more kindness in the world today. You get on, spend any time on Facebook, and there's not a lot of kindness going around. Like you said, that with everything going on in the world, people are so wrapped up in their emotions, and they're unwilling to detach, or they don't know the fact that they need to detach. And everybody's just so dug in right now. Yeah, kindness could go a long way.
And I found that, like, when I'm engaging with friends of mine, and I'm really aware of my internal dialogue, and so you get in having, like, avoiding the debate is not helpful, but you need to keep the debate in a way that is respectful of the person that you're debating with. And so recently, in a big thread exchange I've had, people have gotten pretty heated, and then in my mind, because I know this person on the other side, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're being a hypocrite, because I'm going to point out 5 directions that you're being a hypocrite. I'm like, well, that's not helpful. That's not going to change this person's mind or whatever. But like saying, hey, I value you as a friend, and it's okay that we disagree, and then lay out the points that we disagree, has kept the discussion civil. And I'm really happy for that. The other thing is I also try to filter everything I say on social media to keep it overall generally in a positive line. However, there is a state, there's that thing, and I think Marcus Aurelius said it, that you can commit an injustice by doing nothing. And so when something's blatantly wrong, I feel like it's my responsibility to say that I think it's blatantly wrong, and then have an honest discussion with folks without having it be a disrespectful discussion. Seems to be working.
Yeah. Just do it with kindness and grace. You can go a long way.
Yep.
Well, man, where can people follow you online and learn more about what you got going on?
Okay. On Instagram, I'm at jason.n.gardner, and I work for Echelon Front. That's Jocko and Leif's leadership company. And we help companies and organizations solve problems through leadership. And you can find us at echelonfront.com.
Yeah, man. When it comes to leadership, you guys are the best.
Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for your time. Again, thank you for your service. And I'd love to have you back on someday.
Awesome. Count me in.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right, brother.
Guys, thanks for listening. If you got anything out of today's episode, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using to listen to this right now. And if you're looking for a brotherhood of other like-minded men, guys who like to talk about the kinds of things you heard today, then I encourage you to check out the private Facebook group for The Inspired Legacy. There's a link to the group in today's show notes, as well as a link to leave an Apple Podcast rating and review for the show. And that just helps us get the Inspired Legacy podcast in front of more men. So remember, like, subscribe, leave a review, and share our message, because when we work together to lift up fatherhood, we're going to change the world one dad at a time. Until next time, live inspired.